Dylan Brogan here from Isthmus, alongside Outagamie County Executive and former Assembly Majority Leader Tom Nelson. Tom, thank you for joining me today.
Good to be on. So we go back about what, 12 years now?
Something like that. Were you the last Assembly Majority Leader who was a Democrat?
Yes.
It's been a long time, hasn't it now? So
yeah, I was the first one. I was the first one in 14 years, and the last one now in almost 14 years.
Well, Tom, that brings us to a good point. Why are you the strongest candidate to run against Senator Ron Johnson?
I'm the only one from a red part of the state who's won election, re-election 6 times, 3 as a legislator, 3 as a county executive. If you can win in a red part of the state, particularly the Fox Valley, you can win statewide. And once I get to Washington, given my experience, both executive and legislative, including Assembly Majority Leader, I can do my job and do it well. As
a Democrat running in a red county, how do those elections usually go? What's different?
I win. I think what you have to do is, look, Democrats have got to get this race right, because this is for all the marbles. This is Wisconsin's Senate seat. But in some respects, this is America's Senate seat, because this will determine control of the U.S. Senate, which is a very big deal. And you need to have someone who knows what they're doing, in the sense that they've run before and that they've served before. And I have 18 years as an elected official in 2 different capacities. And the way that you win, not to give away the tricks of the trade, they really aren't tricks, which is you show up, you work hard, you take an interest in all constituents, regardless if they're Democrats or Republicans. And you just need to be able to communicate or talk in such a way that you can appeal to both independents, Republicans, in addition to Democrats.
So tell me just a little bit more about who you are and your political career, and why you're qualified to be a U.S. Senator. You've mentioned several times that you're not a millionaire, and that seems to be relevant in this race.
Yeah, it's very, very relevant. I mean, right now, the U.S. Senate, about 2/3 of the U.S. Senate are millionaires or billionaires. Actually, I don't think they're billionaires. So if one of my opponents gets through, I think he might be the first billionaire. I don't know. Don't quote me. But look, I mean, if I get elected, I'm going to be one of the lonely, 20 or 30, however that is. And I think that's important, because 2/3 of this country are not made up of millionaires and billionaires. And I think part of the reason why Washington gets a bad rap and why people are sick and tired of politicians is because they're checked out. And if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you have absolutely no clue how it is to work for a living, to put food on the table and a roof over your heads. I mean, when I grew up, we weren't rich, but we certainly weren't poor. But, this was still something that my parents had to, be cognizant of, because we didn't have a lot of money. I think that is the case for more Wisconsinites.
Tell us about that. Where did you grow up? You were son of a Lutheran pastor, right?
Yep, I was son of a Lutheran pastor. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood in Little Chute. Our block was Carolyn Drive and Violet Lane, and that was your typical blue-collar neighborhood. In our case, it was a neighborhood where all the dads worked at paper mills, except for my dad, who I like to say wore the white collar, because he was a Lutheran pastor. And so at a very young age, I learned 2 important lessons. Number one, the importance of serving your neighbor. And then also in time, that there are a lot of people who work hard, play by the rules, pay their taxes, but they just can't get ahead, because there's too much wealth and too much power in such few hands. And that is at the root of so many problems in our society, whether it's social, whether it's economic. That's what you have to get to. And again, you need to have someone who comes from that experience. That is my core. It has shaped my worldview. It has shaped my public service as a county executive, of which I have been here in Appleton, or in Outagamie County, the greater Appleton area, for 11 years. And as you mentioned before that in the state assembly, representing both Brown and Outagamie, as well as a small part of Shawano. So this gives you a cross section of the state, right? You've got urban, you've got rural, you've got suburban. And, I think that's what you need. And so not only do I have the kind of background, the experience to do my job and do it well, which I still think is relevant nowadays, though, but I've got the track record to win. And I've been to so many Democratic Party meetings, and so many events, progressive groups in the last year and a half. This is the 19th month of our campaign. I've always asked people to start my speeches, who here does not think that beating Ron Johnson is the number one issue in this race? And no one raises their hand. And again, I'm the only one from a red part of the state who's won election and re-election 6 times. No one else can hold a candle to that.
Yeah, and why is that important, you think, in winning in November, not being from Madison or Milwaukee? We've had lots of U.S. senators from Madison and Milwaukee.
Well, someone asked me, well, is it more important to turn out the vote in Madison or Milwaukee, or to win persuadable votes? And I say 2 things. Number one, all votes are important. This is a 72 county campaign. I've been to 72 counties. I did a 72 county listening session tour, did in 43 days, by the way. So we are all over the place. What I will say in Wisconsin, and this is important, you can tell the political scientists this, there's no such thing as a base election. Wisconsin is a purple state. There are way too many independent, persuadable votes that you need to have a candidate that understands that vote, that can go into that part of the state, in my case, live in that part of the state, and having been elected in Democratic politics for 30 years and public service for 17 years, know how to win over those votes. I think if you had to pick and choose what kind of candidate you need, you're going to need to have the one that can persuade votes. And you talk to Democrats in Milwaukee and Madison, and they will say, we can't figure out the Fox Valley. We need someone from a red part of the state who can win elections. And that's me. I'll be down in, Dane County. I'm so impressed with you guys. Your get out the vote operation is turning on a light switch. It's amazing. You have like 85%, 90% turnout. That's great. So, and also here in Outagamie County, we have very high turnout rates too. So I think that's what it comes down to. The winning formula, and you can talk to prognosticators, you can talk to the party elders, they'll say that. Win over persuadable votes. I've done that before, and I'll do it again. And I think that there's a lot of validation in this campaign. We've got a wide array of endorsements, everything from United Electrical Workers, which is far and away the most progressive labor union. We've got 3 firefighter local union endorsements. We have longtime labor leaders like John Matthews, and also up-and-comers like Kyla Engelke from Milwaukee. That's what you need. You need to have not just a good message and come from a part of the state that Democrats have to win, but the kind of external validation from members, in my case, of the progressive movement that can say that not only can I win this election, though, but I've got the right value set to bring to Washington.
So the primary is August 9th. You're a little behind the polls. Your opponents have lots of outside means besides just donors for fundraising.
Right.
How are you going to close this gap in this remaining few months?
I'm an underdog, and Wisconsin loves an underdog. Russ Feingold, Bill Proxmire. We have a number of leaders, and just saying those 2 names, it's very, very humbling that, I'm looking at their campaigns and their public service record and adopting some of those lessons and models to this race. Look, the only election that matters is the one the only poll that matters is the one on Election Day. But the key thing to take away from these polls is that half the voters are undecided. They're undecided because people are just not engaged. So a smart campaign is going to be the one that's been around for a while, in my case, 19 months, that's been focusing on building the foundation, a strong grassroots foundation, because this is the grassroots campaign. This is the people's campaign. No one else has done a 72 county listening session tour. No one else has a 17-year track record of public service in the state at the local and at the state level. So we have the resources, we have the message, and when folks are really paying attention, we're going to be out there in a big, big way. I also hear a lot of time they say, well, you don't have the money to put millions and millions and millions of dollars behind ads. Well, I've got one opponent has, and he ticked up 6 or 7 points in the poll. It's costing him $500,000 per percentage point. I realize he has all the money in the world, but that sounds to me like a message that's not getting through. On the other hand, Quality. We've got great ads. The one that we released last week ago, where I'm dressed up as a Bucks fan. I'm a Bucks fan. I go back to the 1980s when it was not popular to be a Bucks fan. So I'm a real Bucks fan for sure. And talking about how unpopular this $250 million subsidy to the billionaires was to keep the Bucks in the state. And now here we are 7-8 years later, and one of those billionaires is trying to purchase a U.S. Senate seat in the state. The least thing that they can do, since it's been such a good investment, and their investment increased by fourfold over a 7-year period, is they can pay the money back to the people of Wisconsin with interest. Look, the county or some entities took away money from these very important services. I mean, Milwaukee County is looking at cutting bus line services because those monies had to go to the arena. I think that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. And for people to say that it's been a good investment in the community, I don't disagree with that. But there is also a private return, not just a public return. And I believe those billionaires, including the family of one of my opponents, needs to pay that back and pay it now. And if this particular candidate and this one of my particular opponents is really committed to the voters and the people of Wisconsin, he'll do that.
Well, and these public investment in stadiums, I think you can make a very good argument that they're not worth the investment, even locally. But then there's all these intangible things like the Bucks being having a few great years, right? So, I mean, how do you reconcile those two things if we wouldn't have the Bucks at all? I mean, it's a little different than Foxconn.
Yeah, you can have it both ways. You can have it both ways. When there was a poll conducted 7-8 years ago, when they were entertaining the idea of doing a subsidy, 80% of the voters said, no way. We went through this with Miller Park, and now we're going through, and now Miller Park wants another $100 million. And now we're dealing with this question with the Bucks. I don't think that fans need to be taken advantage of, and they are, because the fans in this state are second to none. I'm here in Packer country, okay? Packer fans are the bust. Okay, Badger fans are good, Brewers fans are good, Bucks. We're all good fans, though. This is a case in point of taking advantage of the goodwill of a community, the goodwill and the commitment of a very loyal fan base. And I should also say, too, though, the unspoken hero in a lot of this is a fellow by the name of Herb Kohl. So he sells the Bucks for about $250 million, but at the same time, too, he kicks in $100 million to the new owners. Think about that. Someone sells you a franchise for $500 million and you get a 20% rebate on that. I think Herb Kohl is one of the greatest statesmen that this state has ever seen. That is someone that we should honor. And I'll tell you what, for one of my opponents to even intimate that he is like Herb Kohl is something that should not be considered.
Well, like Herb Kohl, it definitely has connection to NBA basketball team and plenty of independent wealth, right? But you think that's where the comparisons should end?
I mean, think about this. First of all, Alex is a friend of mine. I got to know him because he interned for one of my friends at the White House. And someone who's here for 7 years, I think he's made a big contribution to the city and to the state. Is it on the level of Herb Kohl? No. Okay, these are worlds apart. I just don't understand why someone or a campaign can get away with making that comparison. Thanks to Senator Herb, of course, he's not weighing in this race. And I think that he's been all but silent on that, which I think shows good restraint on his part, though. But no, I think the comparison between the two is absolutely ridiculous.
And just in terms of just the local union support for the Pfizer Forum investment or subsidy, you've received a little bit of pushback from union leaders. You're a very pro-worker candidate by your own admission. How do you square those two things?
Well, look, I am the pro-worker candidate. I'm the labor candidate. I have the most labor endorsements. I have a 100% AFL-CIO voting record. I'm the one who has the endorsement from key groups like the United Electrical Workers, like our Wisconsin Revolution, people that can do that. You know, I mean, I'm the only one in this race who has saved a paper mill and wrote a book about it. A star reviewed, in fact, and that shows my commitment. I spent 2 years after I worked with a local steelworkers union to save that mill. I spent 2 years looking, a really deep dive, looking at the labor history in the state, manufacturing in the state, and coming up with some ideas of how we can use the combined locks Wisconsin model, not just to rejuvenate the paper industry, but manufacturing in general, and make a solid argument that the key to that is the labor movement. I mean, this is a very special state, and labor is very special too. And I think I'm the only one in this campaign that has that kind of record, that can speak to concrete experience. I think experience that matters to working families. Now, I don't look, my quarrel is definitely not for the hardworking men and women who built the Fiserv arena. That is an incredible example of state-of-the-art craftsmanship, the kind of work that the entire country, maybe in the world, is jealous of. But that's different. That is a different issue than a billionaire coming into town and taking advantage of this, increasing their investment by fourfold and keeping the money. I think that's wrong.
So you brought up, and we're going to talk more about your book in a minute here, but you brought up Senator Feingold earlier, and very obviously respected figure among state politics. Ron Johnson beat him twice. I think a lot of Democrats, a lot of Russ Feingold supporters were just dumbfounded about why. I mean, what lessons do you take from those two races? Were those just rough years, or?
Well, I would say that, the old saying that a broken clock is right at least twice a day. And so Ron Johnson won twice. And I think part of it, and part of the secret for him, is good timing. I don't think he's got the best business acumen. He just happened to have in-laws that are billionaires. And, those were two very difficult Democratic years. And what I've been looking at, and I think it's different than running as a challenger versus an incumbent. And I think Russ, he's not a politician. This was a through and through statesman. We were very fortunate to have people like Russ Feingold and Herb Kohl serving us for 18 years. The state was so well off with them. But I think in any campaign, and I can speak from experience, there are lessons to be learned. And I learned that from both my successes and sometimes when I've come up short. So I think it's, I think it's a kind of comparison, and I think it's the correct one. It's not just our campaign that is making this comparison, but we're getting it from all over. In fact, we actually didn't coin the comparison. It was Bill Glauber at the Journal Sentinel that saw that. So this is something that's coming not from us, but is coming on from people. And look, they would not be saying that in a complimentary way if they didn't think that was a winning formula. The
Democratic establishment, sometimes you're at odds with them and they kind of see you as an outsider. Is that a good or a bad thing heading into this primary?
It's a great thing. It's a great thing. I think that there is not just a populist streak that comes through this state that's elected people like Russ Feingold or Dave Obey or Les Aspin or Gaylord Nelson, but it's also independent. There was an article, I think it was CNN today, where Tammy Baldwin was saying that in rural parts of the state that there is a, quote, independent tradition. That is spot on. I think that folks in the rural areas as well as the urban areas, they prize elected officials who look at the issues, that look beyond the party label. In fact, when I ran for the assembly and I won 3 times, the second, third one by 2-1 margin, I can't tell you how many people whose doors I knocked on that said, look, I lean this way or I lean that way though, but I vote for the person. People take their politics in Wisconsin very serious. They don't just always go Democratic. They don't just always go Republican. So I think having someone that is independent, that shows their independence. When I was in the state assembly, I definitely didn't follow the party line. And as county executive here in a red county, a Trump county, having passed 11 budgets, most of which were on a unanimous margin, a balanced budget, declining tax rate, AAA bond rating, shows not only can I attract independent votes, but there's a lot of Republicans, a lot of independents, I'll vote for Tom Nelson because they can trust me. I have shown that I can take the public trust, that I can run a good county. I can be responsible with their tax dollars. At the same time, implement some pretty important progressive reforms, like cutting edge criminal justice treatment services, or almost doubling the economic impact of a regional airport turning into an international airport, where $700 million a year supporting over 3,000 jobs directly and indirectly in the county and in the region.
Before this interview, Isthmus asked for one issue you'd like to focus on. You decided to talk about the subject of the book you wrote last year. It's called One Day Stronger: How One Local Union Saved a Mill and Changed an Industry, and What It Means for American Manufacturing. So tell me more about the book and how it relates to this year's Senate race.
Yeah, no, this was a great story. On my 17 years in elective office, this is far and away the high point. And this is a really good example that embodies the spirit. Now, you talked about voters prizing independence. And I think that this is a good example of how a community can come together and beat the odds by taking fate into their own hands and doing some things that maybe cut across the grain. So this story is about how I worked with a local union to save a mill that was being auctioned off. And it was auctioned off because a big bank, PNC Bank, came in and called the note, forced them into receivership. And so it was sold to a scrap dealer from California, but we objected to the ruling, went before a local judge, and was able to prevail on him to give us a second chance. We put together a new business model, bringing labor, management, and local government to the table. Within 3 months, we had brought back 300 jobs, turned on 3 machines, and then by the third business quarter, the workers were receiving their profit sharing checks. I think that is an incredible story. And not just are there tangible lessons to learn that we can rejuvenate the labor movement, which is happening right now, help Wisconsin manufacturing, but bring the kind of spirit and the values to Washington about what sets Wisconsin apart, not just Outagamie County, the Fox Valley, but the state. I think there's something very special. And I think that Washington could use some more Wisconsin values. And no, Ron Johnson does not embody Wisconsin values. He's the antithesis of Wisconsin values. And this campaign could not be more diametrically opposite than that.
Yeah, what role should a U.S. Senator play in terms of working with the private sector, working with unions to promote manufacturing and good jobs here in Wisconsin? Is that you consider that an important role for a U.S. Senator?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of our jobs is to help steward a $20 trillion economy. And part of that means working with the private sector to make sure that they have the resources, to make sure they have the support to be able to have a strong and vibrant economy. And yes, there is a role with the government. When we just allow globalization to go crazy, when we don't, when workers are paying more than their fair share, when corporations are cheating workers, cheating their taxes, you need to have the government involved. At the same time, too, and I'm the only one who's come out with a national industrial strategy, and I think I'm the only one in the country that has, showing that how we can tie these different policies together to support industry. Most countries have this, where the government takes an active role to identify different sectors and say, that's national security, that's important to our supply chain, that's important to the overall economy. We don't do that. We give away the bank, we open up markets for other countries like Japan, like China, to take advantage of it. And we bleed jobs and we bleed tax base. And so I understand that it's been bad trade deals, that's been devastating to manufacturing states like Wisconsin. We need to change these trade deals. We need to make sure that the rich is paying their fair share. We need to enforce antitrust laws to stop corporate consolidation that is exacerbating income inequality, that's taking more and more away from the workers, that are cutting good paying jobs, that are busting up unions. All of these pieces come together. A lot of my opponents will say, well, we need to raise the minimum wage. We need to do something about the PRO Act. I don't get it. They need to have a holistic worldview on this. One of the few people in the U.S. Senate that really understands this is Sherrod Brown. And my public service will be patterned a lot after Sherrod Brown because he's the one who gets it. And he needs an ally. We don't just need someone in Congress that can check the boxes and go to a labor union and ask for their support. You need someone who is in it for the long haul, that's got a plan to make sure that this economy goes to a worker economy. Worker economics is something that the Democratic Party embraced back in Lyndon Johnson and FDR, and we've completely lost sight of that. And you know what? There have been some Democratic administrations that have embraced this neoliberalism, neocon foreign policy that's been absolutely devastating to the working class, and I think is a source of the problem that we have, why so many Democrats have abandoned the Democratic Party to go to the Republican Party. It's going to take us time. It's going to take us several election cycles to be able to get those voters back. And in the meantime, we have to champion and we have to be effective in implementing these pro-worker policies.
So you mentioned Sherrod Brown. He's running in Ohio, which is maybe even more of a red state than Wisconsin. Do you think he provides a framework for?
Absolutely. I think it's brilliant. They once said at Sherrod Brown that in Ohio, Sherrod Brown and Republicans get elected. Sherrod Brown is not a conservative Democrat. Sherrod Brown is not a moderate Democrat. I would imagine that if you talk to Sherrod Brown, I've never met him before, by the way, he would probably say that he's a pro-worker, progressive Democrat. And you see someone like Tim Ryan trying to do that, John Fetterman doing that. So, and Lucas Coons, this isn't a one-off. I think people are finally grabbing on to the Sherrod Brown model, that we need to have a worker focus. We need to have a bread and butter economic focused policy. And that's what I bring to the table. I come from a blue collar neighborhood that grew up with, that had paper workers. I mean, I played with the sons and daughters of paper workers, and all of us had the same shot at the American dream because we had good tax base, we had good jobs, we had good schools, we had low crime. All that comes together. We've lost sight about that. We put a premium on tax cuts for the rich, for trickle economics. It's been an unmitigated disaster. Democrats have not stood up. Democrats have not fought as hard against that as possible. I will make it my mission to do everything I can to join forces with people like Sherrod Brown, like Tammy Baldwin, to remake this country's economy and put workers first once and for all.
I've been joined by Outagamie County Executive Tom Nelson. He's one of the candidates for U.S. Senate on the Democrat side. The primary is August 9th. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.